Okay, so we recognize that individuals do not evolve, populations evolve. And the raw materials for evolution is this phenotypic variation, or lots of variation from one individual to another, from peppered moths to pandas to people. The question becomes, okay, so where does this phenotypic variation come from? Consider human height. So here is a cool bell-shaped curve, a distribution of human heights with females in white and then males in black. We've got about 5 feet over here on the far left. So my daughter's going to be somewhere over here, and then over 6 foot 5 inches out here to your right. So, what causes that phenotypic variation? Why do humans vary in their heights? Obviously, your sex matters, at least in part, which is a product of the underlying genetic variation. So you remember from 181 that the 23rd pair of chromosomes in humans are the sex determinant chromosomes. XY means that you're biologically male. It's going to push you further to the right hand side of that distribution. But it's not just the 23rd pair of chromosomes. Different combinations of alleles are going to produce different traits within the same species. So human height is highly hereditary. It's a classic polygenic trait. Multiple alleles are associated with height. In fact, we have now identified 44 different loci that are known to influence normal variation of height, and they are distributed across every chromosome. Collectively, these allele combinations strongly determine your genetic potential with respect to height. So there are several questions below in this learning activity that are going to walk you through the sources of genetic variation, including the formation of new alleles through mutation, chromosomal changes that are going to duplicate or delete, disrupt, or otherwise rearrange the genes. And then lastly, of course, the reshuffling of genes that occurs because of sexual reproduction, recombination, that results in crossing over, as well as the independent assortment of chromosomes, and then fertilization. If your ancestors hail from a region of the world where the domestication of cows has been part of that culture for thousands of years, then you likely have the alleles for lactase persistence. Lactase is the enzyme that allows humans to cleave the lactose molecule and absorb it. So I've included a short video from National Geographic Explorer in Residence, Spencer Wells, that's going to provide you with some more context on the interplay between human culture and our genes. So the classic dichotomy is this nature versus nurture idea, where our traits are a function of both nature, meaning our genes, as well as nurture, or the influence of our environment. So, whether or not you received adequate nutrition as a child also has a dramatic impact on your ultimate height. So, over the past 100 years, we see human height from countries around the world increasing. So, the Netherlands here on the far left, The Dutch are known to be the tallest people in the world, and you can see between 1914 and 2014 that the average Dutch man increased. But we also see the same increase in the Middle East, here in Iran, in South Korea, and in Guatemala. Although the difference here, the gain in height, is not quite as great. So, what's the big difference? Why are humans getting taller over the past 100 years? 100 years, it's way too short of a time period to attribute to genetic change, right? Evolution happens over millennia. So, what's the big difference? Nutrition. Our global industrialized agricultural system produces more calories today per capita than it did in 1914. The data are very clear. Malnourished children do not attain their genetic potential for heights. Whether or not you received enough calories, enough protein as a child, is what we call an environmental influence. Again, it's an oversimplification. You'll hear this dichotomy referred to as nature versus nurture, where nurture represents the influence of the environment. So here's another way to represent those height data. With all of these 7 countries exhibiting the same trend, there's been this increase in male on this graph, but as well as female heights over the past 100 years. There's only one kind of anomaly in this graph. Do you see it? So, since the late 1970s, the wealthiest country in the world, at least as measured by GDP or gross domestic product, has actually seen a decline in male height. And that anomaly is us, the United States of America. So the researchers that collected these data point to 2 possible drivers for the decline in male heights. The first driver that they point out is our eroding social safety net. So all of the countries that show the greatest increase in height, they have universal health care. In fact, the Dutch, the Netherlands, was the very first country to adopt universal health care. They've had it for decades. They adopted it way back in 1941. The United States, although rich, has very high rates of income inequality. Unfortunately, our rates of malnutrition, of hunger, are much higher than those European countries. So, our hunger rates here in the US, as indicated by this graphic here on the left, are much closer to places like Estonia and Turkey, Poland, and Greece. So, about 24% of children in the US are below the poverty line. 22 million children rely on free or reduced lunch. 6 out of 7 of those hungry children do go hungry over the summer. And 45% of food stamp users here in the US are children. So malnutrition disproportionately affects our children, and it likely causes detrimental consequences like stunted heights that last a lifetime. So that's one driver that researchers identify. The second driver is immigration rates. So we've had lots of immigration from Central America, places like Guatemala, where we know that human heights are shorter. Okay, so always good to dive into the data, but this is a real world example of how the environment impacts a phenotypic trait. So the environment drives phenotypic variation, not just in humans, but across species. So this is a stunning example. It's one of my favorites. So this caterpillar of a moth called Nemoria arizonaria lives right here in Arizona. It hides from predators by mimicking the foods that the caterpillars themselves feed upon. So Nemoria caterpillars emerge in two batches, one in the spring and then one later in the summer. But the two batches of caterpillars, the spring versus summer, they're going to look very, very different. Okay. Larvae that are born in the spring, they are going to develop into caterpillars that look just like oak catkins. So these are the male flowers on oak trees. And the caterpillars feed on these flowers, and their phenotype radically changes because of their diet. Meanwhile, larvae that hatch later in the summer after the oatkins are gone, they're feeding on oak leaves and they're going to develop into caterpillars that look just like oak twigs. So the environment, in this case, what the caterpillars are consuming, their diet, has a radical impact on their physical appearance. A fascinating new field in biology is deemed epigenetics, and it's the study of how chemical modifications of our DNA caused by the environment can turn genes on or off without changing the underlying genetic code itself. In essence, it's not nature or nurture. It's really nature and nurture. It's both, including the interactions between the environment itself and the genome of the organism. Classic example of epigenetics is the agouti mouse experiment, where genetically identical mice can look completely different. Some are yellow and obese, whereas others are brown and lean, depending upon whether a specific gene, the agouti gene, as it's named in this case, is switched on or off by DNA methylation. So when pregnant mice are fed a diet rich in methyl groups like folic acid and vitamin B12, then their offspring are more likely to have that agouti gene silenced, leading to healthy brown coats and overall lower risk of disease. So this demonstrates that environmental factors such as diet can influence gene expression and traits across generations, all through what are known as these epigenetic mechanisms.